everyone, welcome back to Shot Edge Projects. I'm Taylor, and you're here for part 2 of the basement project. My client wanted custom cabinets built on either side of her fireplace, so we talked about what her needs were and kind of what we wanted these cabinets to look like. So we decided that she very much wanted to have space for a record player and records. So I'd build shelves that were tall enough and deep enough to hold those records. The other side we decided to be a standard array for books, movies, games, game consoles, and some speakers to hook up to the TV. So what I decided on was this kind of design is what I sketched out right here. Basically having a half bookshelf on the left side with a cabinet on the bottom and then an L-shaped cabinet that would come out to hold the record player with storage underneath. And on the right side, just your standard bookshelf. I did make them 2 different heights to accommodate the window that is on the left side. I thought it would be a nice, you want to keep as much light down there as you can because it is a basement. So you want to keep as much of that natural light coming in that you possibly can. With that, I basically went out and sketched up my designs and went down to my dad's workshop. He's got a much nicer workshop than I do with more tools and a lot more knowledge under his belt. So we went down there and I bought 3/4 inch plywood for all of the structural support pieces. I bought 1/2 inch plywood for all of my shelves and then 1/4 inch plywood for the backs. So let's jump into building these cabinets. Let's go.
So, on a table saw, you are able to adjust the blade angle, so we are making sure it is perfectly 90 degrees, otherwise you will have an angled cut, which you do not want.
My thought process here, just to explain what is going through my head, okay?
So what my dad is doing here is he is checking the straightness of the boards. You want to make sure that the side you put up against the fence on your table saw is as close to perfectly straight as possible. Usually that is the factory edge, but you just want to double check every time. So we decided that these initial cuts to make the boards easier to handle were going to be cut with a circular saw, which he proceeded to do. This just makes the board a lot easier to handle when using it on the table saw. And you'll find my mistake right here. Luckily we didn't damage the board. So we are measuring the distance from the blade to the fence to make sure it is exactly what we need. You have to account for the kerf of the blade, which is basically how thick the blade is. And at this point, we kind of decided it's just too big to handle. We're worried about keeping it up against the fence and getting a straight cut. So we decided to rethink our plan and try this again. So I am pushing it up against the fence while he pushes it through. I'm not applying a lot of pressure, just enough to make sure it stays up against that fence to get a straight as possible cut.
Let's look at it. This is where I grew up. All of this woods. Goes on up over the hill. Got quite a bit of property. This is my parents' house. And over here, we've got a wood pile. So we're gonna look for a straight board. See what we can find. Oh yeah, it goes up there too.
So here we're lining up a chalk line to get a straight line all the way across the board, which is an easier guide to follow. So you're going to watch here, my dad's going to snap this string. And basically that leaves a giant line across your board that you can follow. You can see it better in this shot. That blue line, that's from the chalk. And so that gives you a straight line to cut down, an easier guide to follow rather than eyeballing it with a pencil or even taking a giant straight edge, it's just much easier to use your chalk line.
We're good.
Cool. We'll do it that way.
So we're in a new location now because it was freezing cold outside. We decided to work in my parents' addition off to the side of the house. We can use the miter saw and circular saw and get sawdust everywhere, and it's a lot easier to clean up. And it's warmer. So that's where we proceeded to do the rest of the cuts. So a trick on a miter saw is if you can't cut all the way through, just flip your board around and line it up as best you can, and then you can go back through and cut the other side. So since my cabinets are having sliding doors, we have to cut grooves in each board. So that is much easier done on the table saw. You just set your blade down really low and make a groove. We did about half the thickness of this board. And we were so close on getting this to fit. So we decided to run it through again. Basically, to get it wider, you just keep adjusting the fence distance from your blade just ever so slightly, and that will take away more and more pieces of wood, but you want to do it gradually, otherwise you'll get a rough groove. Granted, I did later sand them all down, but you'll get a much harder groove to work with. And we got a perfect fit. It was a little loose, but I will take that over it being too tight. And we just repeated that process for all of the tops and bottoms of the cabinets. So what my dad's doing here is we are making a 1-inch square. Basically, it's going to be a spacer for the next bit, where we are going to be cutting shelf supports to go inside the bookshelf. It makes things a lot easier. So he's clamped that square in place, and now you can just push this board up against it. It's the perfect width each time. You don't have to completely readjust every single time you cut. So I kind of don't have the footage for where we put everything together, but it's pretty standard. We set it up on the ground, secured all of our sides, and right now I'm screwing in a base. The basement has really low ceilings, so we kind of had to figure out a way to install the bookshelf without having to stand it up on an angle, because we figured out that the angle would hit the ceiling based on how high this bookshelf is. Making sure all of our corners are square, because it does move just because you've secured the sides. If you don't put on a back piece or a front piece, your sides will move. So you use the square to make sure everything is lined up while you screw on the back. We have a bookshelf without any shelves.
Ooh, that one's right on the money. Look at that.
So here I realized I didn't take into account, when measuring the height, the brackets that the legs would screw into, and we were making sure that it would not exceed my 6-inch limit for the legs, which it does not. The feet actually ended up being around a little over 5.5 inches long, which was fantastic because the bracket took up about a little less than ½ inch of space, which made my total inches for this bookshelf 77 inches, and her ceiling height is an even 7 foot. So that gave me a little bit of wiggle room, and it worked out well.
About 1/4 of an inch. I've
3/4 roughly.
more actually.
It's close to 6 inches, but it's not quite
5
over.
7/8.
It's not over 6 inches,
Right.
which is the good thing.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay,
Now,
it's close. Is it perfect? No. But it's pretty close. It's rustic. No. That's not a real pencil.
started pushing on it and realized that this shelf is one of the bottom ones and it's going to be holding the most weight, so we decided to put a bracer in here. We decided it wasn't needed for the other shelves since this one was going to be holding game consoles and other heavier items, which is why we only put the brace on the bottom shelf. Little close-up of how we did the brackets. We took our super long level, made sure each side was plumb, took the bracket, lined it up best I could, secured it with a clamp, put the smaller level on top, and adjusted accordingly to make sure it was level. I didn't like the hammer, I could do it better by feel. Drilled my pilot holes. Drilled in one screw in the back, and we found it was easier to do screw by screw because when you drilled your second pilot hole it would make the entire shelf move. So putting one screw in the back and then drilling the second hole and then putting the second screw in worked better.
Shelf!
And here's a completed bookshelf with shelves. So here we are kind of putting together the sides of the second shelf. This side is basically a half bookshelf that sits on top of another cabinet. So here's a little montage of us putting it together. My dad held the sides square, which we did use a square for, and I screwed them in. So just to show that everyone makes mistakes, what I had realized is the way I'd planned to assemble this bookshelf wasn't structurally as good as the way it should have been done. So we had to adjust some measurements, adjust the doors, adjust the door heights, get another piece of wood. It shows everyone makes mistakes and it's good to dry fit everything first and make sure it all fits and then move forward. And if mistakes happen, you correct them and move on. So right here, I show the door and you can see that it is too short. It doesn't reach the top of the cabinet, which is what we had to adjust. Basically cutting new doors out of my other piece of wood.
Alright, we're into day 2 of this part. But it's been a little bit of time doing this project together. So I'm going to start sanding some of these cabinets down. My dad is looking for new back pieces because we realized that these back pieces here it's a little red. I know it's showing out brown on the camera, but it's very much red wood, and that sanding is not going to take it off. So we got an extra piece of wood over there that we're going to use for a back to this tall cabinet right here. And then we have another piece of wood that we're going to use to a back to the shorter inside cabinet base. But we still need a part for the half bookshelf, so that's what he is looking for right now. But in the meantime, I'm going to get some sanding done. Again, with some 220 grit sandpaper, because we're not trying to really get the marks out. We're just trying to make it a little bit smoother. They're already pretty high grade plywood. I'm using BC plywood on this project. So we're just going to try and buff some of that out, make it look all nice and smooth, so I don't get splinters, because I've got a few of those. I'm doing the next bit of sanding by hand on the edges of the plywood here, just because my sander is a little hard for that. So I'm using one of these hand sanders. So what you do is you take your piece of sandpaper, and basically it has these tabs that you pull up. You can see in there, there's little teeth. You take it, and I always have to press it against myself. Second side's always harder than the first side, because of course it is. Alright, at this point I'm going to take what I can get, but I seem to kind of get it locked in, so it's locked in on both sides. And then you can just undo it to your hand. Since we're stopped, I'm going to go ahead and empty all the sawdust that's coming out of this thing, because there's a lot of it. And we're good to go.
So I purchased birch edge banding, which is iron-on edge banding, so it's got an adhesive back that is heat activated. So basically you line it up a little over. This was a learning process for me. I had never done this before, but watched several tutorials and YouTube videos. You want to make sure that your edge is over your beginning, because as you press it along the adhesive, it will pull, and then it wouldn't line up well at the end, and then once it cools, you can't move it. But basically you take an iron on the hottest setting that you can, and you want to leave it on for longer than this. I did learn as I went. This was my first piece. But basically it finishes your edges, and then you trim with a razor blade or an X-Acto knife. And you get a little piece off. And it just makes your plywood not look like plywood. It gives it a nice finish to look like a solid piece of wood. It is stainable, so it would match after I completed all of that process, and it just makes your project look a lot nicer. And I found it was really easy to just measure and snap it off with my hand. I was cutting it with a razor blade, but honestly, you're cutting the jagged edges off at the end, so I might as well just snap it off, which was a lot easier to do. I think for the entire project we ended up using 3 rolls of this. I had wanted 4 just in case, but the store only had 3, so I made do with what I had and just kind of made sure to be as close as I could. And here's me trying to patch where my learning mistake happened. Luckily this was on the inside of the cabinet corner, so it wouldn't be as noticeable. It wasn't on an outside edge. So unless you're staring really, really hard at the corner, you wouldn't notice this part. I found it was easier to press down on it after it had cooled a little bit with my hand, so I wasn't burning myself, but it was also helping press it into place. And then this is what the entire piece looks like with all of the edge banding. It looks much cleaner, much nicer, more finished. I'm so proud of those sliding shelves. I couldn't believe it actually worked.
Next we're going to take that orange back off. We're getting a new piece of wood to put on the back. And after that I'm going to be wiping them all down with tack cloth. Well, first vacuuming, then wiping everything down with tack cloth, and then I'm going to be putting pre-stain on, then stain, and then polyurethane top coat twice. So I'm going to be doing 2 layers of that, and I will show you all that process coming up.
I was really impressed with how far pre-stain went. I used that entire can, but it really, really, really helped get a more even finish on everything. Next is a light wash stain. We decided to do a light stain to counteract. You'll see she has really dark floors, and the lighting isn't as great, so we were worried that a dark stain would really just make it feel cave-like and really small, so we went with a nice natural light wood stain.
This is it after it oxidizes for a little bit. Nice and light, bringing out that wood grain.
This is me proudly standing next to my creation. This was the more complicated side, but I think it turned out really, really well. As you can see here, her floors are really dark, and we did paint the walls light, but it is down in the basement, so the windows are the only ones that you see here, plus the lighting above, so we thought this light wood would be a great contrast to that. This is the half bookshelf that's going to be holding the records. And I'm securing it to the base with these straight metal brackets that are basically going to hold the cabinets together. And you're not going to see them on the sides because the one is against the wall, and the other side I only installed 1 bracket, so it will hide behind the fireplace and it won't be seen. I had pre-drilled all my holes at my parents' house, which was much easier when I got here. I didn't have to line everything up, drill the pilot holes, and then screw everything in. They were already done, so I could just line my bracket up and screw the screws right in. decided to go to an impact driver because my drill just was making things more difficult, and the impact driver did a much cleaner job. I was afraid of stripping all my screws. We were going to just pick this up and stick it into the corner.
Stop hurting yourself. I mean, I have felt feet. Put felt feet on it.
Lesson learned. Much nicer. Now we could actually slide it without scratching her brand new floors. Remember, put felt feet on first, then set up cabinet. So I used L brackets to attach this cabinet to the other one. I wanted it to be kind of a fluid piece. I didn't want an extra part in there, so that's what I'm doing here. So now it's all one cohesive piece. Yes, I realize it's covering half the shot. Did I realize it at the time? No. But nothing's really going on except me screwing the feet on this base, which I will explain when we install this bookshelf. My client's husband came downstairs to discuss where we wanted to drill the holes so that you could run cables through this bookshelf, since they were going to have game consoles and a subwoofer going on the bottom shelf that would attach to the TV. So he came down to discuss how we were going to do that and where he thought they would be best for his setup.
That's really nifty looking.
Thanks. I thought it turned out pretty cute. And those fit records. I measured exactly, so all of those shelves can hold your
Sweet.
records.
Well,
Yeah.
that's nothing more stuff like come out of my office.
We then took all of the shelves outside, and I used my technical term hole bit. I don't know what it's called. It drills a perfect hole out when you use it, and companies love making these packages super insanely hard to get into. I understand why, but I don't understand why. So this is us installing the cabinet. As you saw, there is a base sitting there already. So we knew we didn't want to lean it because the distance would have been too great for the ceiling if we had already installed the feet onto this. So we had to work around that. Basically, we pick it up, put it onto this little platform, we lined it up best we could by feel. It was just a little easier to do it that way. Clamped it down, and then I drilled 9 holes into the base to make sure it would stay put, and then it was attached. One of these bad boys drills holes. And you have a circle. That easy. What wasn't easy was getting that wood piece out. I didn't film the part outside, but there are the holes. So they run along every piece down from that hole in the side cabinet. We decided they didn't need to go up because they weren't going to have any electronics above that shelf.
What do you think?
Here's a nice close-up of my record shelves. They fit records. That flat surface is where they're going to put their record player. The bottom has storage for all kinds of items, baskets, blankets, anything like that. And then we have this other shelf to their specific measurements. The top is to hold possibly a plant. The rest hold DVDs, books, then PlayStations, and then speakers and other heavier items at the bottom. And I think they look fantastic. It fits in there like a glove. That was the big point. And I think they look really, really great. The light wood really pops next to the fireplace and the floor, and it looks fantastic. Don't worry, I did stain that strip around the fireplace later. I just hadn't done that at the time.
And that's it. We left the cabinets light to kind of counteract the dark wood that was going on down there. I felt like if we did dark, it would be too much. But I love how the light wood came out with the blue of the fireplace and the dark of the floor. I really think these came out pretty good. Are they perfect? No, but am I a carpenter? Not even close. But I'm learning. We're slowly learning and slowly getting there. They worked out great for what she needed. And I can't wait to show you with them all filled and with the basement finished. She's moving some furniture around in her house. So once we get that all figured out, I will be sure to send updates. In the meantime, if you liked anything about this video, hit that like button. If you want to see more of my projects, hit that subscribe button. And I am coming at you with another project here very soon. So keep in touch. You can find me on social media, both Facebook and Instagram, at Shaw Edge Projects. That's pretty much where I post live updates, where I have projects coming out and anything new coming up. So be sure and follow me over there. And I will see you in the next one. Bye!